On Sunday, the Los Angeles Times published a comprehensive report that details new allegations of sexual misconduct and abuse by Russell Simmons and Brett Ratner. Now, the report is about 13 pages in length. It's very long, but I'm going to walk you through it. It centers around the accusations of a model, Keri Claussen Khalighi, who is 17 years old at the time. She tells her story about how she went back to the apartment of the Def Jam recording mogul Russell Simmons to take a look at what he and Brett said was a music video. Then she says, quickly Simmons began making aggressive sexual advances, yanking off her clothes, Khalighi said. I looked over at Brett and said, help me, and I'll never forget the look on his face, she recalled. In that moment, the realization fell on me that they were in it together. Now, for his part, Russell Simmons has vehemently denied these allegations. He has cited all the work that he's put in for women's advocacy and his involvement in the hashtag MeToo campaign. He also released a statement which said, in part, in a statement, Simmons, 60, strongly disputed her account. Everything that occurred between Keri and me occurred with her full consent and participation, he said. Much of the 2 days and one night he spent with her, he said, was with other people or in public. Ratner had no recollection of Khalighi asking him for help and denied witnessing her protest, his attorney Martin Singer said. Now, this comes on the heels of many women coming forward and speaking about their own allegations of abuse by Brett Ratner. And what the Los Angeles Times report breaks down is how they see that Ratner was surrounding himself with other powerful Hollywood players that were complicit in his abuse and sometimes even participating. They say in several of the accounts, the women said that Ratner, 48, surrounded himself with powerful friends, including Simmons and filmmaker James Toback, who, while sharing Ratner's Playboy lifestyle, have also been accused of engaging in sexual misconduct. Those friendships, some women said, enabled inappropriate behavior within the group, sometimes by active participation and in other cases by simply providing venues for incidences to take place. There's a number of things that come up. They have a whole bunch of different women that speak on the record about their own experiences with these men. Some of this stuff is just coming out from their own words. So for example, in 2007 in Russell Simmons' book, he talks about his relationship with Brett Ratner, saying in part, after he hung around a bit and figured out that I liked models, then he made it his business to take me to every model's apartment he could find. Then there's also a 2005 Playboy article where Simmons left the table where he was talking with the interviewer, and then it came to light that when he left the table for about an hour, it was to engage in sex with a model who Ratner had just had sex with. So there are all these stories that the Los Angeles Times breaks down, a number of women speaking on the record. And then just to walk you through it again before I get a response from you all, Simmons' attorney has provided a signed statement from Simmons' former assistant Anthony McNair, who said he saw Khalighi go to Simmons' bedroom on her own volition without any coercion or undue influence. McNair said the group also went out to a nightclub later that evening. McNair said he saw Khalighi at Simmons' house the next day, an assertion affirmed by Simmons, and did not notice any visible signs of distress or anything improper that had occurred. Now, Khalighi retorts saying that she did not see anyone but Simmons or Ratner at Simmons' home and did not recall being there the next day. The Times could not reach McNair for comment. She also, after the Times published the story about Ratner, she reached out to him and told him that she was going to publicly tell her story, that she was considering that. She urged him to disclose his past behavior. He called her, she said, and they spoke for 27 minutes, according to phone records reviewed by the Times. Simmons said he did not deny any of the claims. Instead, he apologized, mentioning that he is now a father of 2 daughters. So that is sort of the spark notes of what is detailed in this Los Angeles Times account. You guys read it through. What was your response?
So let's separate out the issues. So there's Brett Ratner, who there is a lot of credible allegations against, including in the last set of stories and this set of stories. This story is ostensibly about Russell Simmons, at least that's the headlines. But when you read it, there's far more cases about Brett Ratner, and so those allegations look incredibly credible. Okay, so Ratner is and should be in a world of trouble. Now, Russell Simmons and Ratner hung out together. That by itself doesn't prove anything. Okay, on the other hand, the allegations by Khalighi are disturbing, to say the least. And look, whenever there's any kind of bias or conflict of interest, I try to be transparent about it. I know Russell Simmons a tiny bit. He's been on the show a couple of times. I've been on panels with him. I like him. I don't know anything about this, right? And as what happened with Cosby, I liked his work, and Russell Simmons did Run DMC and Beastie Boys and Public Enemy, and that's 3 out of the top, 5 favorite things that I grew up to. And so it's, well, I'm telling you that in an effort to get past it, okay? So the assistant saying she came back later. Well, that actually happens a lot. It does, it is logical for people to think, oh, well, that must mean that she liked him. No, not necessarily the case at all. That's part of the power dynamic here, is that a lot of the women and sometimes men feel that that if they don't do as they're told, their careers are going to be absolutely ruined. So yes, sometimes they show up the next day. And in this case, we don't even know if she showed up the next day. That's just what the assistant is saying. And in the case of Ratner, there's another story in this long LA Times story about a woman who then, after Ratner brushed up against her and made inappropriate comments and physical actions, she wrote him a nice note. But Anita Hill wrote a nice note to Clarence Thomas. Many women write nice notes later because they're afraid that they're going to lose their careers. And also, it's not just that. It's that they feel like, oh, am I doing the wrong thing by challenging them? And is everybody going to say that I'm a poor sport, or 1,000 different pressures here? So if the allegations are true in the case of Khalighi, and right now, unlike Ratner, this appears to be the sole claim against Russell Simmons. As with these stories, you never know if that's how it's going to wind up. But if they're true, they're devastating. So,
Brett, let's get your input.
I watched the news lately, similar to the way I watched The Walking Dead, just to see which one of my heroes will turn out to be like a soulless, blood-sucking creep. Like in Walking Dead, they turn into zombies. In the news, my heroes turn out to be sexual predators. And it's so devastating, and I totally get it. I think an important part is for people who look up to certain folks, as you can't not. There's gonna be people you look up to. For me, it's Al Franken and Louis C.K. And then you hear these stories, you read these stories, and you think to yourself, it's okay to have that first reaction of, it's unavoidable to have that first reaction of, I love that person. Oh my God, I watched every episode of The Cosby Show. That was like my TV dad. But you have to kind of compartmentalize it, as you hear that a lot of victims have to compartmentalize the feelings they have surrounding an event like this and try to figure out what actually happened. I think something important with the Khalighian one, or whatever, I don't know how, Khalighi, is this part. Did you read the part about the lawyer, what the lawyers have said afterwards? There's this part in the article where the expose or whatever you want to call it, where there's this moment where years later, Russell Simmons approaches Khalighi and they embrace, they talk about the incident, and they don't give specifics about what was apologized for, but there was some kind of apology and there was like a hug, one said. But then, and it seems like they're working towards some kind of solution between the two of them, but then the lawyers come in with a statement. And the statement is things like, now, however, I guess maybe it's a Ratner, there's one where Ratner, and there's another one with Simmons' lawyer, where it's like, they never heard any alleged, or they basically say that there was never, I don't know, they kind of equivocate and say this is not an admission of guilt. And that's what's frustrating, is that the lawyers have been able to identify exactly the power structures in place that keep certain bits of evidence from coming into any potential legal case. And you hear all these guys say, well, I've grown a lot as a person and I was in a really tough place back then. But they never really want to take full responsibility. And they definitely don't want to suffer any kind of legal consequence. And so they want this like hug at the whatever it is, Soho house, to mean something, but the lawyers step in and are like, but it can't be any like legal consequence that they suffer. That's something that's frustrating for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and you can understand why, if it is true and he admits it, there probably are legal consequences. And so his lawyer is gonna tackle him and say, don't do that. I'm not saying that that's right, I'm just telling you what a lawyer is gonna do. And look, it's just, these are all super hard because, they say we believe the women is now a saying, right? And I want you to understand what that means. It's a little bit like Black Lives Matter. It doesn't mean that no other lives matter, right? It means Black Lives Matter as well. And we believe the women doesn't mean that every woman is always telling the truth in every case. It means, generally speaking, we're now at a state in our society where all those charges that we didn't believe, we brushed under the rug and didn't give credit to, it turns out they were largely right, okay? It doesn't mean that you believe every single woman. Of course, there's a case in Virginia that Rolling Stone got in so much trouble for, where a woman had made up allegations and they investigated and it turned out it wasn't true. And we have a criminal justice system where we don't just believe people, we go through a process. But the phrase does mean something, which is in the past they were largely not believed. And in reality, about 2% of cases statistically are not true. 98% are true. And
what we're talking about is empowering people who have been powerless, whose voices did not matter for so long. And now, because of what has swayed in the wake of the Harvey Weinstein piece, now these women are feeling emboldened to come forward. Or I don't even want to say these women, these people are coming forward, because just later we're going to be talking about Terry Crews. But for years there was this, in Hollywood and in other industries as well, as we will also discuss, there was this insane power dynamic where these people at the top just wielded such influence that people felt powerless to come forward, or they felt powerless to voice how they truly felt a situation went down. And that is crystal clear in this Los Angeles Times piece, because they also talk with the actress Sarah Shahi, who talks about her experience with Brett Ratner that she felt was inappropriate, but that she also felt like she had to keep up a good relationship with him because of his power in Hollywood. And then, Brett and I were talking before we went to tape about how do you reconcile that? Like, should she have called him out earlier, or what?
But that's what we believe the woman means, because back then it was really, really, really hard to come out because people wouldn't believe you. And back then it was like 2 months ago. So now you're getting an avalanche of these stories because there's almost like a sense of relief from women who have held this back for so long, finally going, oh, I can say it and somebody will believe me.
And she says, I was trying to be a smart businesswoman, this is Sarah Shahi, by keeping the lines of communication open. I played the Hollywood game like every other actress. And then Ratner's attorney, vehemently denies this, saying that, she was very flirty. These overwhelming contradictions make the claims inherently improbable, is what he says to her part. But I think that what we hear from these actresses, especially that are coming forward, is like, this was the territory. This is what you had to do to get work.
Right. It's like all these wide-eyed models who, were when they were 17, they came to Los Angeles and they had these dreams of making it as a model or an actress. Like, in my opinion, from what I've read, and this is just my speculation, Brett Ratner wasn't dreaming of coming, to Hollywood just to be the director. He was dreaming about having these interactions, getting to a point where he had like the jet and the fancy house where he'd get women into his place, and he was gonna design it here, and there'd be jacuzzi there, and he'd have all these women over. And since he became Brett Ratner, he was gonna have this. And I get it. And there's all these things happening, but it really frustrates me when I see things like, Russell Simmons saying he has found peace now. It's like, well, that's the most selfish approach. I'm glad you've found peace, but like, think about all the stuff you've put maybe not him, but like generally the entire dynamic is, this has created a very weird place for people to have to handle the lay of the land. And you find yourself saying, well, me anyways, I find myself saying the most pure-souled person is the one who sees this injustice and says, no, I have to stop it immediately. That's a really tough place to put someone in. And then I find myself saying someone who waited until a moment when they had a little power, even though they benefited. Like, for me, it's Tig Notaro. Like, Tig Notaro is the one who made this Louis C.K. thing kind of happen, one of the very few. But she wouldn't have been able to make the difference unless she had gotten Louis C.K. to produce some of her stuff. And so she benefited, I guess, in a certain way, but then she becomes the one who is now big enough to say something that gets more people to do the research, combined with the Gawker article, finally the New York Times says it. So she didn't speak out. I guess people like her haven't all spoken out immediately, But when they do get some power, I just don't know where to draw the line. And I find like we all need a PhD in ethics math at the end of this because we have so many data points on what kind of perv you can be in America.
Well, but look, nuance matters, and so that's why I'm trying to constantly give context. So the last piece of context here, for Ratner, if he wanted to have the Hollywood lifestyle and have the jacuzzi and the girls, he shares that with almost every guy in the country. That's totally different than the descriptions that many of these women give, including Jamie Ong, who says she was 21, she's at his mansion in Hollywood. And then he corners her in a room, won't let her leave, starts groping at her, and then takes out his penis and does what he has apparently done with Olivia Munn, etc. And he tries to get her to touch it, she won't, and finally he masturbates. So this is something that many women have accused Ratner of. That is, I hope, not in the dreams of the young kids who are trying to get the jacuzzi in Hollywood.
But I think it's the same. It's just, he had this dream, and I think that dream is inherently sexist. Like the dream that I will have money and power, which will translate to women in bikinis under Hef's waterfall. Like that is inherently sexist because it implies that women are attracted to money and power, and that's just not. I don't think that's a nice thing to do. Whether it's true or not, I'm sure there are women who are attracted to that, and I'm sure he had success with certain women, and then he comes along women who had like a good relationship with their father or whatever, and they finally say no. But I don't know. I feel like Brett Ratner didn't start off with the first woman when he got his first director's gig and had him up to his hotel room and whipped out his junk, and when she said no, started masturbating in front of her. I think he over time honed this like sick trap that he lured a lot of people into, and he got better at it and more confident in it, and he became more Brett Ratner than he was before, and he got to a point, but it started with that first you get the money, then you get the power, Yeah.
And the last thing on Russell Simmons is that what Grace read to you was from Toure, who had interviewed him back in 1994. Not about the Khalighi thing, but about how Brett Ratner apparently was done with a girl, and Russell Simmons went up and also had some sort of relationship with her. No one is alleging that was not consensual. So, if it was consensual, that's their business. And I don't want to get into the business of overly judging people's sex lives because we're not those people. We're not the evangelical pastors and hypocrites, etc., getting into people's sex lives and telling them what to do and what not to do. We only care about stuff that is non-consensual or creates a work environment where there's sexual harassment and it's hostile, etc. So far, the only charge against Russell Simmons is the one from Khalighi. And sometimes there could be a misinterpretation. She thought it wasn't consensual, he thought it was. I don't know if that's what they're gonna claim. But to be clear, she says she fought it wildly, so that there should not have been any mistake as to what went down. And so eventually she says she acquiesced to oral sex because she felt like she had no choice in getting out of that situation. So I want to be as clear as we can on the facts presented. TYT membership gets you commercial-free Young Turks. Download it, stream it, podcast it, get all the network shows, and support independent media. TYTnetwork.com/join.